All right. Good morning and good afternoon from wherever you are. My name is Stephen Nabil Rogers. I am the Executive Director for Africa Faith and Justice Network. We're based here in Washington, D.C. For those of you who are joining our event for the first time, AFJN is a faith-based advocacy network. We've been doing advocacy for 53 years here. We advocate for just US-Africa relations. We amplify the voices of African communities, and we promote justice, peace, and sustainable development. Overall, we tackle the structures that keep people in poverty. We address systemic issues and impact communities across the continent. Now, let me begin with a simple but very powerful question. What happens in Africa when a community loses its land? Not just the soil, but the land that feeds them, sustains them, and connects them to their identity. Today, we gather here around a theme that speaks directly to that question. And for many communities across Africa, this is not just theoretical, it is a lived reality. For more than a decade, AFGN has been working alongside communities, especially in Ghana, to prevent land grabbing and to promote responsible investment and transparent investment. This work is deeply rooted in our Catholic social teaching, the dignity of every human person, the call to the common good, and our responsibility to stand with the most vulnerable. Because land is not just a property, it is food, it is culture, it is dignity. And yet, across Africa, millions of hectares of land have been acquired, often without full consent from communities. Communities are displaced. So, this documentary is not just a story, it is a call to listen, a call to understand, and a call to act. Therefore, before we begin, let us take a moment to ground ourselves in prayer. It is therefore my privilege to call Reverend Sister Nkechi, who is not online, but she will pray for us, and then we will move on from there. Sister Nkechi, I know you're on the phone and you can pray.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So let us pray. Wellspring of hope, God of our ancestors, you endowed us, Africans, with land and other resources, including the communal spirit. But oh God, today, our people and land continue to plead with climate change, insecurity, and lack of stewardship in the use of both human and natural resources you give us. Our leaders have parted ways with integrity and our communal spirit of accountability. God of liberation, through the efforts of AFJN, other organizations and individuals calling for change in Africa, we ask you, God, to unleash any shackles that bind and restrict Africa and her children on the path of justice and true freedom. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for that beautiful prayer, Sister Nkechi Iwoa, Paul Handling of Jesus Christ. and the chair of the board of directors for Africa Faith and Justice Network. Now, I want to introduce to you our panelists. First, I will introduce Father ANIEDI OKURE. Father Okure is a Dominican priest. He's a global advocate for peace and justice. He currently serves at the United Nations with the Dominicans. Prior to that position, he was the executive director for African Faith and Justice Network. Father has now a long history. He served as a fellow of the Catholic University of America, coordinator of ethnic ministry at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, and a vicar provincial for North America and the Caribbean for his Dominican province. He has taught in many universities here in the US and in Nigeria, and he has led workshops on intercultural competence and pastoral ministry, among a variety of his work. Thank you for that idea, and it's so good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Our next speaker will be Mr. JAFF Napoleon BAMENJO. Mr. BAMENJO is joining us. He is a coordinator for the Network of Hunger to Fight Against Hunger called RELUFA in Cameroon. He leads advocacy efforts focused on transparency, fair management, and natural resources. Mr. BAMENJO ensures that resources and revenues benefit local communities, and they contribute to sustainable development. He holds a master's degree in development studies from the Institute of Social Studies in The Hague and from the University of Yaoundé in Cameroon. Mr. BAMENJO, it's so good to have you here.
Thank you, Rogers. So happy to be with you guys today for this conversation.
Thank you. I will now introduce Mr. NASAKO Besingi. Mr. Besingi is a Cameroonian, social and environmental activist, and a sustainable farmer. He is the founder of Struggle to Economize Future Environments, called SEFE for short, an organization that works to protect mangroves and wetlands and to combat deforestation driven by large-scale palm oil expansion. He's also a very strong advocate for human rights, particularly in Cameroon's Anglophone communities. He was detained in 2017 for his role in supporting civil rights protests. Mr. Besingi, it's so good to have you here. And hopefully we'll have you like Cameroon. I will also introduce Sister Ignatius Safowa Boaben. She's a Catholic religious sister and social justice network advocate for AFJN in Ghana. She works with our Women's Empowerment Coordinator here to coordinate our women's program in Ghana and to amplify women's voices in land and resource governance. Her work focuses on protecting vulnerable communities and promoting human dignity across Ghana. And finally, we have Mr. Peter K. Otieno. Mr. Otieno is the Executive Director for Reconcile. He's a regional organization leader in Eastern Africa, and she's focused on research, advocacy, and capacity building on land, environment, and natural resources. He provides strategic leadership on pastoral issues. Through key regional and global platforms, he supports data-driven advocacy on land governance and pastoralist rights across Africa. We are so honored to have you here, Mr. Otieno. It is truly a blessing to have all of you here today. Now, we are moving on to introduce our screening of a video that we had put together. And our hope is that this very rich group of panelists would help us make sense of this from their experiences, their vantage points, and what they have done. With that, we will now go on to the video which we made on our work in Ghana in the past 10 years. Thank you.
1 hectare for $5. That is totally inadequate.
Colonization never ended. It only changed its face. Today, it does not march under flags or come in chains. It arrives in contracts signed behind closed doors, sometimes in the open. It promises jobs, development, progress. But what does it truly deliver? In the heart of West Africa, where ancient traditions meet modern ambitions, a quiet crisis is unfolding. In Ghana, land is more than soil. It is survival. It feeds families. It carries culture. It ties the living to their ancestors and secures the future for generations yet to come. To take it away is to erase a people's story.
We are here in Breniwasi. Our journey to Breniwasi started in Cameroon, where we were tracking a case of land grabbing and injustice against the people of Dian in southern part of Cameroon. The same company had acquired land in Ghana, here in Breniwasi. And that is how our research led us to Breniwasi.
I am Nana Tidibokura Odama II, Paramount Chief of Untibo Traditional Area, and the patron to African Faith Justice Network. African Faith and Justice Network is an advocacy group from America who advocate for African lands, especially land grabbing in Africa, where multimillionaires, investors come to acquire land and stand to it. The people, they take the lands from them. So this group came 2014 to the land of Untibo, Brewaniasi.
And yet, across Africa and here in Ghana, land is vanishing, sold, leased, or grabbed by powerful corporations and foreign investors with shady background. Sometimes for as little as $5 a hectare.
You are leasing 1 hectare for $5 is inadequate, woefully inadequate.
The money they are giving to us is not helping us, because I will lease my land for 1 year and get only 50 cedis per acre.
For 50 years, 75 years, 99 years, contracts that stretch longer than a human lifetime, land gone forever.
They came and met the chiefs of Asukoko. They sent them to hotels to entertain them, not fearing the conditions that will come later. And later on, when they prepared their agreement, lease agreement, the people saw that they have put themselves into trouble. There was nowhere they can go to get relief from this trouble. In actual fact, they sit from the, but the youth of the landlords got up that no, their future is being damaged by these their elders.
My father was over 70 years when he leased out the land. We later realized that he leased a hectare of land for 50 Ghana cedis, which was equivalent to $5.
Before you sign any agreement, you need to know what is in the agreement. You have to get somebody who is a legal person to read and explain to you the details of that agreement. But we never had something like that. They took us to the hotel, the 15 family members. We, the family heads, we formed the committee of the the landowners.
When it was time for us to eat, they told us to order for anything we wanted. And I ordered 4 Guinness beer. When you get, you sign. And we did that one after the other for all the 12 family heads. That is where I said, we did not know the content of the agreement.
We were thinking that by so doing, well, our children and generations will benefit.
They call it investment. But for the farmers who can no longer plant, for the families forced from their homes, for the rivers poisoned and the forests stripped bare, this is not an investment, a quiet invasion, an attack not with guns, but with pens. The Africa Faith and Justice Network, AFJN, sounded the alarm. A Catholic faith-based advocacy group based in Washington, D.C., AFJN had seen the pattern before, a country after country across Africa. They knew what it meant, they knew what was coming, and they came to Ghana.
Our job here is very crucial because we are trying to prevent you from losing even the little bit you still can claim on your name.
For more than nearly a decade, AFJN has walked into rural towns and villages, empowering communities to protect and defend what is rightfully theirs, teaching farmers their rights, warning chiefs of the dangers, building coalitions with local partners.
Ending poverty means focusing on food security. Africa has become the target by multinational corporations as part of a response to the food insecurity. We have seen instances where companies come into Africa, buying land for pennies and signing multiple years of leases, some as many as 99 years, and growing and shipping those food abroad. You cannot solve poverty by actually targeting the people who already have nothing to grow the food and ship those food to people who already have enough. The majority of this continent is rural. It means most of them are farmers. The only thing they have is their land, that they grow their food, they raise their families, and they hand over to their generations. Statistics have shown us that 26% of the arable land is now in the hands of multinational corporations. In Ghana, 8.6% of its land is already in the hands of multinational corporations. So this is a growing emergency in a country that is already hungry. So that's why we're raising awareness. We are actually providing information to the people, and we are also creating advocacy skills for individuals so that they can find ways to be able to get back their lands where it's possible.
They teach you how to be outspoken, how to be, vocal in doing things. I sent a petition to the Volta Regional Lands Commission. After 3 months, Volta Regional Lands Commission wrote to us that our portion of land has been taken out from what the investor is taking.
The Africa Faith and Justice Network, AFJN, has won battles, has exposed corruption. But the forces behind land grabbing are relentless wealthy corporations, foreign governments, and local collaborators driven by greed. And for every victory, another deal threatens to undo it.
My name is Fidelis Kwesidamba from Bontibo, that is Northern Ntrubo. We have come to learn about how people grab land, especially as we have Heracle farms. They have come to do in Brewaniasi, and then the landlords are suffering, especially they cannot go to the lands they have leased. So what I have learned is that when we go back to our respective communities, if we want to lease lands to people or companies, then we need to pass through the proper channel.
Almost 15,000 acres.
The land the foreigners wanted was 15,000 acres. Initially, they promised to build an airport on the land. but we later realized that they were using it for an estate building.
Something happened. Our last outreach yesterday, a community, they went into land contracts for 99 years. Even though they said there has been a review for 50 years. But even as that, 50 years, and looking at the landowners that went into this agreement, I bet you most of them will not live up to 20 years. So you can imagine the harm they will cause the next generation.
This is the fight for Africa's future. Because when the land is gone, so too is the food, the home, the heritage, the freedom. What is at stake here is nothing less than survival. Across Ghana, fertile lands are disappearing at an alarming rate. Thousands of hectares are being handed over to multinational corporations, displacing smallholder farmers and threatening food security. Entire generations deprived of their land.
Had it not been that you have come today, we could even sell this month.
Entire communities signed away with the stroke of a pen. The damage does not end with the land. Water sources are poisoned, sacred groves destroyed. Ghana, a land rich with promise, is becoming dependent, buying food it once grew in abundance.
The small stream that passes through channels, some small waterfall, when it's rain, that those chemicals that they are be using is that be contaminated with our water bodies. So we are suffering based on that, and they have given us disease and those kind of things.
Because of the lease of this large tract of land, the youth, mostly, who are indigenous, don't have any other place to work to earn their daily bread.
These are not isolated incidents. They are coordinated, driven by foreign greed, local complicity, and silence. This is why the Africa Faith Justice Network, AFJN, chose not to remain silent. For a decade, they have stood in the gap. They have trained communities to read the fine print. They have exposed predatory deals. They have prevented land losses and restored land to villages who thought it was lost forever. The struggle is steep. The resources are few and the enemy is powerful.
Africa Faith and Justice Network effort to bring awareness to the global community, particularly to Africa, about land grabbing is that land is the only resource that is ours and we can claim it. If we lose our land, we lose our independence, we lose our sovereignty. We lose our food sovereignty, our seed sovereignty, and our political sovereignty. Whoever controls what you eat controls you.
In the cities, life goes on as usual. Markets overflow with food, restaurants bustle, and families sit to eat in comfort, unaware that the very ground that feeds them may be slipping away. AFJN calls us to stand, resist secrecy, to demand fairness, to stop agrocolonialism, to protect and defend the land not only for ourselves but for generations yet to come. Because the land does not belong to us alone. It belongs also to those whose footsteps we have not yet heard. We do not inherit the land from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children, and now our children are watching.
Thank you for that short video. Well, that was a powerful and deeply reflective video. Let us now hear from our panelists. I wanted to start with you, Father ANIEDI. Land has become a global issue, but in Africa, it has taken on some critical dimension, as we've seen in this video as well. With increasing investor interest in fertile land, millions of hectares have been acquired, often without transparency or community consent. Against this backdrop, you were the executive director of this organization and the UN mentioned this at the time. What led AFJN to take on this issue among many other issues? And why did it become a focal point for the start of this work? You're muted.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rogers, and thanks to AFJN staff and all who have made this session possible. The video speaks volume. It speaks for itself and has touched on many of the points I was trying to make. The title itself, "When the land is gone, so is the food," is right on the point. And I may add, when the land is gone, so is the identity and heritage of the people. What prompted us? We did research on how to engage in Africa, engage Africans to do advocacy for justice for themselves. In the process, we discovered that something fishy was going on. We saw a repeat of history, something that happened 2 centuries earlier, namely the partition and colonization of Africa disguised as a Africa developed. We know the story. Land grab in many ways mimic this exploitation. So before I go into some specifics, let me begin by showing some background facts. First, since the year 2000, about 33 million hectares of Africa's prime arable land have been acquired by corporations and foreign governments. That is about 330,000 square kilometers. Let that sink in for a while. 330,000 kilometers taken from unsuspected communities. The data is consistent from various research databases, including Land Matrix, a source that I trust well for its accuracy in this matter. So since 2000, Africa is the most targeted region globally for their land grab. And of the estimated 70 million hectares grabbed globally, more than half is in Africa. And this terms, as the video points out, 30, 50, 99 years for agriculture, biofuel, and mining. So Africa is the epicenter of land-scale foreign acquisition. It is important that we put this in historical perspective, namely the scramble for and colonization of Africa following the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885. It happened 2 centuries earlier. What prompted this? The biggest rush for Africa's land acquisition surged between 2008 and 2010, and this was triggered by several factors that combined into the exploitation of Africa through land grab. The first was the fears of food insecurity. Food importing nations such as the Gulf states and corporations rushed to acquire Africa farmlands to grow food not for Africans, but for themselves and for their animals. Very interesting. It was food for themselves and the animals, and touted as a plan to help Africa in food sovereignty. This resulted in a double tragedy for Africans: loss of land, loss of food, as captured in the video title. The second was energy policies in Europe and the US, requiring transition to clean energy and prompting companies to seek alternatives to fossil fuel. So crops like jaffa, palm oil, sugar cane became the in thing. And where would you get that? Africa. A third was the demand for natural resources, minerals and timber. Here is where the DRC and Cameroon suffers the most. And the fourth was the financial speculation and crisis that peaked in 2008 with the collapse of Wall Street and major financial institutions. This pushed investors to look for tangible assets. And Africa's land was seen as, oh, it's stable, it's tangible, we can invest in it, and it will appreciate over the years. So these factors, coupled by weak land policies within the African continent, work together to exploit Africa. Some African countries encourage investment, offered tax breaks, and promoted their countries as good for business. So this gave very crafty companies and foreign governments the opportunity to rush in and take advantage of the Africans, unsuspected Africans. Again, I go back to the history of the partition and colonization. It was crafted as a help, but in reality, food importing countries were using that to disempower Africans. The double tragedy is what we see today. So why Ghana? The choice of Ghana was prompted by two factors. First, we noticed that Ghana was one of the top countries in West Africa suffering from land grab. The second was Ghana's linkage to Heracles Farms, which was mentioned in the video. Heracles Farm had already acquired about 70,000 hectares of land in Cameroon and was trying to do the same in Ghana. So while we were pursuing Heracles Farm in Cameroon, we found that they were in Ghana. So we sent a research. Bahati went there and found out this was true. So this is important because we got the contract that Heracles Farm signed with the community in Ghana. Is telling, part of the agreement reads that, quote, after the agreement is signed, if there is any disagreement, the arbitration shall take place in the court in Paris. Given the circumstance of signing the agreement, which one of the chiefs said, we were taken to a hotel, given drinks, entertained, and asked to sign. In fact, I'm appealing to the Ghanaian government to look into it and declare some of those agreements null and void, because the people were tricked into it. And some of them said, I ordered Guinness and drank, so they were not properly reasoning. So that's, Dr. Rogers, that's my first take for it, that we need to look into it and see where we can undo the damage that has been done. Some of the things have been mentioned already in the video in terms of inadequate compensation, environmental damage, loss of culture and ancestral land, and land grab in Ghana happened through subtle engagement with traditional authorities and the Judases within the community. So the impact on women is not only loss of their land, they are subject to being employed by these very corporations and their labor exploited. So I will stop for there for now and give others a chance to say something.
Just found out muted. I'm sorry. I just found out I was muted. I wanted to thank Father for the work that you did and historicize his work, which is exactly where we wanted to start for this conversation. But more importantly, how AFJN chose to go where we are. And thank you for really breaking this down into the various issues around expectation, the fall of the financial market, and how that ignited the process. I wanted to go to Mr. Besingi. Behind this issue, there are aware. Mr. Besingi, you were to some extent either displaced as a result of this desire of multinational corporations to go and claim land where the community already lives. Can you share your experience from somebody in Ghana and how it impacted your community and what you did about it? Jeff Singing.
Okay. Thank you, Rogers. I am happy to be part of this conversation. Sorry that for some moment I was off because they said the studio was full, and I'm happy to be back. And I listened to the stage very clearly, giving some alarming statistics and also the historical background of this land grabbing and also the reasons for the land rush. I think that was very, very important. Coming back to your question, Stephen, I think for us coming from Cameroon, there are lots of similarities with what happened in Ghana. But referring specifically to your question, defending community land right has always been the anchor of RELUFA's work. RELUFA, as you introduced earlier, is the French acronym for Network for the Fight Against Hunger. And our mission is to fight against the systemic causes or the root causes of hunger. And we also function from the approach that large-scale plantation agriculture is one of the root causes of hunger in most countries in Africa, as Father Okure already said. And in the land acquisition process, local communities are always dispossessed of their land. And this compromises local food sovereignty. That is why this is very important to us, and it is really a concern. And as we have seen in the documentary, large-scale plantation agriculture is biased towards the production of cash crops, which is meant essentially for export and not necessarily to address local food security concern. That is why this is a very important subject for us to approach and have a conversation like we are having now. And there is always an infringement on the customary land and the resources rights of these local communities, that depend on this land. RELUFA, as an organization, is against land grabbing by multinational companies. And therefore, we advocate for proper regulation of land-based investments, which is not always the case in most countries. And we think that legally protecting individual and collective rights to land for local communities is key. Because in most of our countries, there is that recognition for the use of land, but not necessarily legal ownership. So that is where you always have the clash between those who come for large-scale land acquisition and also the local communities who depend on that land for their livelihood, as we saw in the documentary. So food sovereignty is always preserved when the local, communities do control, when they have control over the means of local food production. And when they have that control, local food production is always assured. And with large-scale land acquisition, this is a danger. If we go back a bit, I know Reverend Father already, led the stage, but I want to look at the structural adjustment program, that happened in the 1990s. I think it also contributed to the challenge we are currently facing with respect to the local food systems in many African countries. In Cameroon, for instance, smallholder and state-driven agricultural systems were basically ignored, with this structural adjustment program. They were ignored in favor of systems driven by foreign investors. And these foreign investors require vast lands for their investment. So some years there was food self-sufficiency in Cameroon, a country that was basically feeding the entire Central African sub-region. But now there's a lot of import of food. Even rice that we consume is mostly imported, despite the local production potential of this commodity. So, following on what Father said, in 2014 specifically, there are some conservative estimates that 2 million hectares of land was requested for lease by foreign investors in Cameroon, essentially for palm oil plantations and other cash crops. But we can say plantations may contribute to increasing global crop production, but it undermines local food security. As I said, their products are generally for export or biofuel, and also Father explained that. So this is a major concern. Therefore, in sum, RELUFA's work to fight against land grabbing is really closely linked to our quest to protect local food sovereignty. Because when land is lost, as we saw in the documentary, so too is the food. So I can stop there for now. Maybe looking for further questions, to deepen the conversation.
So much, Mr. Bamenja, and that's a very good way of putting, the problem in a very systematic way, and connecting it to the systems, the issues around the IMF structural adjustment programs, the SRS, and this whole idea of moving away from state interventions into private sector, and how all of that has moved on. And some of this work we are doing as AFJN, especially with this palm kernels that are really undermining the African traditional family in terms of what they used to grow to their food. Okay, so I'm going to switch, and I'm coming back to you because I have a second question, and to both you and Father Aniedi. But I wanted to give an opportunity to Mr. NASAKO. I think he is around to be the next speaker. I hope if he can just come on the camera, and then we'll be happy to talk to NASAKO Besingi. Is he available? Okay. All right. So before he goes there, I want to come back to Father Aniedi, if Father Aniedi, because I had a second question, and while we're waiting for Mr. NASAKO to come in, you historicize this problem, and you got a full grasp of it, especially coming from our faith as Catholics, focused on the dignity of the human being. That trade is only good if it benefits the people. And what happens now? My question to you would be, and what do people still misunderstand about land, dignity, and food security? Like, what are we doing that perhaps we could have done differently to address the problem that's currently happening in the space? And you're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. That is a very important question and gets to the heart of the matter in terms of governance, in terms of looking out for the common people. I intentionally brought up the partition and colonization because that should have taught African governments a lesson they haven't learned, to keep trusting corporations that are seeking their own good. The misconception that these corporations are out here to help you, the corporations, business corporations don't go into business to help you. They are in to make profit. It's not like AFJN or any other faith-based NGO trying to help people. Corporations are there for business, not for your own good, first and foremost. So there is that misconception on the part of African leaders. On the other side is this misconception that, plenty of land in Africa is not used, we can go and grab it, we can take it and do whatever we want. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, African leaders fall for it. That's the lesson that people haven't learned. That misconception that they have come to help us, forgetting that the ancestors were helped over 200 years ago. Look at where they are now. Some countries are poorer now than they were before this land grab and food production starts. And we look carefully, we notice that, as my colleague said a minute ago, the food planted is a cash crop, not what is consumed locally. So they not only lost their land, they lost their food. The video caption puts it well. So we need to learn that lesson. And as I said, I'm really calling on the government, in this case, the Ghanaian government, to look seriously into the contracts, because those contracts are flawed. Those contracts are flawed. And the Ghana government should annul some of them, really, for the sake of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Father. And just to follow up on that, before I come back to Mr. BAMENJO, when we go on the field as Africa Faith and Justice Network, and this is true for many others who are working in this space, often the issue is between how do you get a balance between investment and also doing justice. So oftentimes the message gets sent out to imply that questioning the way companies, organizations operating in these countries, whether they are violating their corporate social responsibility, or whether they are not meeting the demands for the leases they sign, or whether their governments are not supporting them, is that you are anti-business, and that these companies are here to bring investment. So always there is this strong nexus that is not very clearly defined, and it kind of puts you in between. What do you think we are not doing correct to make sure that this misunderstanding is very much, at least to promote business without necessarily undermining human rights and all of the things that you mentioned?
So perhaps, now I'm just saying, so perhaps, if you really want to catch, draw attention, when you see evil, scream out, cry out as with 1 million voices, because silence will kill the world. So I'm thinking maybe we should opt media publicity, name and shame. In fact, I'm here in Geneva, where the UN session is on, the 61st General Session is on. And although organizations like us don't have the real power, but we engage in name and shame. And countries don't like that. So if we get media publicity on this, to let the Ghana governments understand that some people in the government have failed their people, they have failed Ghanaians, they have collaborated with exploiters to disempower Ghanaians, to take up the sacred land, the ancestral land. And by the way, when Ghana got independence in 1960, not just about then, there were just barely 10 million Ghanaians living there. Today, according to census, there are over 35.7 million Ghanaians. And so the land that they have, the population is going this way, the land is shrinking. Very soon, many Ghanaians will wake up and find out that they are living on borrowed lands. They'll be tenants on their ancestral home, and that is a terrible thing to happen. So the government needs to wake up and prevent this from happening and ensure that the children, the Ghanaian children later don't have to fight for this. As it was said before, our ancestors said, we who are alive now, we do not inherit the land from ancestors, we borrow it from our children. So Ghana's government should ensure that what is borrowed is kept sacred. Thank you.
Indeed, indeed, we do not inherit from our ancestors. We do borrow from them. And that is a concept that has always been in Africa, which is why sometimes land is not always sold. The chiefs are considered the custodians of those lands so that that land can remain in the community, that the community can pass on to other generations, and then they can use that. This brings me to the question of Mr. Bamenjo. I was going to follow up on you again, and thank you so much for laying out the policies, especially what RELUFA is doing. One of the things that AFJN, especially as we're doing this, and this comes in as a question, it's one thing to prevent land from being grabbed, but then there is a real question being made that oftentimes the lands are underutilized. And because, yes, if you go to local rural areas, they don't have enough funds maybe to grow their food. And this becomes, it becomes a target for predatory land ownership, where they go in, they give them money that appears that it's actually lucrative, but it's nothing. And then the lands get taken away for tens of years. You are also being innovative with seeds and all of that, which sounds like an acknowledgement of that problem, that we have to fill that gap. Can you tell us a little bit about what are these alternative ways to make sure that, first of all, we keep the communities in these areas being able to utilize the land so that they don't become really predatories and victims of predation to predatory lenders, some of them local Ghanaians, some of them multinational corporations?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Rogers. This is a very, very important question that we've asked. Before I go there, let me just also show the relationship that RELUFA has had with the African Faith and Justice Network in doing this work. And again, as I can say, it is not only about contesting land grab. When we've contested, what do we do? It is equally important. So the two go side by side. So going back to a case that Father Okure mentioned from the start, Heracles Farms actually obtained a land lease in Cameroon, a concession of 73,000 hectares, which is like 180,000 acres of land for palm plantation project. This is very similar to what happened in Ghana. And in 2014, a staff of the African Faith and Justice Network, Jacques Bahati, actually came to Cameroon, and together we accompanied him to the concession area to speak with the local communities, to meet with them, and also talk with local stakeholders. And what is peculiar about this particular concession is that, unlike in Ghana, where the land rent was actually low, it was even lower in Cameroon. So the company was supposed to pay 50 cents per hectare per year if they don't develop the land, and to pay $1 per hectare per year if they develop the land. $1 per hectare per year. So, and there was also an inconsistency. This was actually signed by a minister, with the company. But in Cameroon, any concession above 50 hectares should be signed by the President of the Republic. So this was an inconsistency. So all of this attracted a lot of resistance, mobilization by national, local, and also international civil society organizations, including the African Faith and Justice Network, to contest and expose this state of issues. So sensitizations were conducted with local communities. in the concession area, and there was also active mobilization for a reversal. I can say some victories were obtained because the President of the Republic actually intervened to reverse the initial agreement that was signed with respect to the scale, the duration, and also the land rents, reducing it from 99 years to 3 years renewable, and also from $1 per hectare per year to $6 per hectare per year, which is still so low. And now, that said, now the land is there. Do people use it? That is maybe the question that you ask. And we are saying that there is also, it is the responsibility of a country to feed its people. And it cannot transfer this to foreign private investors. Therefore, local community food production needs to be supported. And that is something that is always lacking. So RELUFA as an organization, we have been combining these two strategies in terms of resisting land grab and also supporting local agricultural production so that the local people who are involved in production can maybe improve the yields, also use the land. But it becomes difficult when they are completely dispossessed. An example, within the Heracles concession in Cameroon, there were farmers who had their cocoa farms, who could maybe earn like maybe $5,000 in a year. But if this piece of land is seized from them and given to a foreign investor with the assumption that they are going to pay taxes, that is going to develop the country, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. Compare the $5,000 that this farmer is earning from the cocoa farm to the $1 that the company will be paying. So it is very important to also take note that besides resisting this issue of land grab, it is also very important to support local production by these local farmers. Now, let me make some comparison with what is happening at the moment. Most of the farmers always depended on, fertilizer, which is imported, to boost their local production. But with the current war, invasion of Ukraine by Russia, chemical fertilizer is no longer maybe available, or when available is so expensive and not, within the reach of most of the farmers. So they have now fallen back to organic fertilization. And this is something that we are encouraging. This is an alternative to chemical fertilizer. So when they use organic fertilization, on their farms, production actually improves. So the issue is we need, as civil society organizations, to combine the two. Let us resist land grabbing. Let us also support local, farming, to boost the local production by these communities.
Thank you so much, Mr. BAMENJO, and thank you for that really beautiful way of especially talking about how AFJN and RELUFA have been working for years, and really the conversation around how we merged with the issue around Heracles, which, by the way, it's a multilateral corporation doing agriculture. I think it was a US-based company at the time. I don't know. It's changed over the years, especially as we have been pushing and making sure that wherever they are working, they are not exploiting their people. I wanted to just say for our audience, I know it's now 12:11, and this was a 1-hour event, but of course we started a little late for the technical piece. So some of you may have questions. If you had questions, and maybe you may have put it in the chat, or you can send it in the chat. But if some of you want to ask questions live, you could just let the studio know, and they would let you come in and ask the question to our two panelists. While we are doing that, I also wanted you to know that we are expecting 2 more panelists, and just not to be quiet. These panelists are in Africa, and for one reason or the other, some of them have had difficulty joining. Now I see Sister Ignitia Safao Boaben. Sister is in Ghana. This morning I spoke to her. She was in Atebubu, which is a little bit remote, and I understand why she was not able to join. But sister, if you're here, you're welcome. And if you want to make a statement, I will be happy to ask you. You work on the AFJN Women's Empowerment Project. and you have seen firsthand the impact of this phenomenon, this problem on our women, our girls, who are oftentimes the breadwinners and who are also the ones who bear the most when, you know, our men make these really terrible decisions and give up everything they had. Can you maybe briefly talk about your work or your experience working with us, if you're still with us? Sister Ignitia? All right, sounds like we have lost Sister Ignitia for a moment. Okay. All right, so we've lost Sister Ignitia on this. So maybe what I would do if we don't have, okay, Sister Ignitia is back. Is it back? Okay, so maybe what I can do as a way of closing up, if we don't have Sister Ignitia here, but I just wanted to briefly say Sister Ignitia works on this and she has a very powerful experience on this and some of the work you can see on our website. We had also invited Mr. Besigi. Mr. Besigi was actually a victim of some of these problems, and we wanted to bring the human aspect to it. But as always, sometimes the challenge is communication, especially when people are in some parts of Africa, and we do understand. So we do acknowledge that when they have problems with communication, there's very little we can do about it. But we would kind of come in. Yes, Father Aniedi, I think you wanted to make a statement as a way of closing and a message for this panel.
It wasn't so much time to close. I want to touch something you just said about people working together, to emphasize that when you mentioned the relationship between RELUFA and AFJN, is that these things, we need to collaborate. People with like minds, looking for the good of the people, need to collaborate in our advancing days. You know, we work together. Together we are stronger. Of course, you know the favorite proverb that we quote over and over at AFJN: when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. We need to collaborate. People on the ground call the rest outside. We need to support each other. So please, those of us on the, you know, on the phone or on the video, realize the importance of collaboration. It is vital in this process. And actually, I want to repeat my call again for the Ghanaian government to seriously look into these contracts, because many of them are flawed. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to add to that, Father, and thank you so much, that the work that all of us on this field have been doing have indeed pushed the boundaries to how much these predatory lenders, or even in collusion with the local governments, have impacted our people. In some places where we have seen policies have changed gradually, we are not happy exactly where it is, but it's better than where it was. In our most recent visit, as you heard from the video, when Sister Naomi was talking about the change in the law that makes it impossible that you cannot sign a lease for 99 years anymore. Now they are brought it down to, I think, 60 years or so. That's progress, but that is not enough, because these are predatory leases that are signed for literally the pennies, and people are giving up something that generations will never benefit from, especially in rural Africa, where all they have is their land to grow their food, to raise their family, to put their children in school, and to raise their cattle. So these have been some of the challenges. So I have Mr. Ken. Ken, is it Mr. Besingui? Is that Mr. Besingui?
He is muted. He is muted.
I'm trying to figure out, is that Mr. Besingui? You're muted. Okay. All right. So what I would do is maybe as a way of closing, I would ask you to maybe just haven't made this statement. What that is Ken from? We can hear him. We can see him. Yeah. So that's Ken from Land Matrix, but somehow we can't hear him and he's muted, so we can't hear what he's saying. Mr. Ken, are you
You haven't given me a chance. I wasn't speaking, so I don't know whether.
Okay. Well, welcome. You were muted when you came in, and we were trying to get you to speak.
No, I've been listening all through. Anyway, thanks.
Okay. All right. So, Ken, you are from Land Matrix. I know you collect all of the statistics and the data. Maybe just as a way of us, bringing this to a closure, could you, if you have, just provide some brief data that people, just for everyone who doesn't know what's the impact of this work, of this phenomenon in Africa, like how much of this in terms of statistics, or what you guys are finding on the field, and how is that relevant for this work that we are
doing? Thank you, Stephen. I don't work for Land Matrix, I work for Reconcile. I think you did introduce me properly earlier. Land Matrix is just but a program which one of my staff is leading, that is Pascal, who has been engaging with the organization. And you've thrown me off balance because what you shared with me and the kind of conversation you wanted me to have and the question you are asking me now is different. But nonetheless, I would say that with regards to data is one of the issues that, of course, is a problem. And I want to associate with both the documentary and also the contributions that have been made, and just say that across the region, particularly now that most of the panelists have spoken about the region, but Kenya, Tanzania, and other countries across, we are suffering the brunt of large-scale land investment. And oftentimes, how I look at it is that we need to understand two things. First, we need to understand what is investment, and secondly, we need to understand who are the investors. And with that, then you are able to define the nature of that investment and the kind of investment that we are talking about. And you can then look at it in terms of scope and scale. Whereas Land Matrix reports over 15 million hectares to have been acquired since the year 2000, there are also challenges across Africa, and particularly the work that we do as Reconcile. Our main work is targeting the people we define as resource-dependent communities. That is the pastoralists and the minority communities or indigenous people. And if you look at the scale of investment, and I think Father Okure made that reference a little bit, that there is this scramble for land in Africa. And it is not just land, it is land of the indigenous people, it's land for the pastoralists. And when that happens, the first definition that is given to that land is that it is bare land, it is open land. And that is not true, because this land supports pastoralism. This is rangelands, this is not wasteland. And when you look at it from that perspective, then you look at mega investments such as the Lamu Port, South Sudan, Ethiopia investment program, which is a big investment that straddles all the way from the coastal region, Ethiopia, Kenya, getting down to the central part and the north rift of Kenya, and down to the western part of Kenya. These investments cuts across different rights and tenures. And what happens with that is that a lot of rights are then undermined, and people lose their land, and people lose their livelihood. And who compensates them? Data needs to be available so that we can then engage the policymakers. So for me, that is one thing that I would say about large-scale land investment and also the problems around data. Today in the morning, I was just reading from one of our media, our social media, and the government of Tanzania has declared another large eviction from the Mara, Serengeti, Maasai communities. And this is a continuation of what was there in terms of looking at this land as land that is supposed to be used historically for UNESCO. It's a UNESCO site, and they are looking at it from the conservation. And if you look at the tension that is always there, it is not just investment; it's also about conservation. And when you talk about conservation, how do you do conservation and still continue respecting the rights and livelihoods of the indigenous people or pastoralists? That doesn't happen oftentimes. And there is a question you raised from the questions you had sent me earlier, that what would then be, the mismatch? What is the missing link for advocacy, international advocacy organizations such as yours? And for me, there are a couple of things that I would say. One, how do we as international organizations, advocacy organizations, understand the local dynamics and understand the local policy context? And two, how do we understand the dynamics around local communities and their interests? The documentary you just shared about Ghana underscores this fact by one, what is the role of local authorities and local institutions, especially the traditional institutions? They still hold a lot of power, and they're the ones who then enter into some of these agreements unknowingly what 99 years means in terms of lease, or what 2 years means in terms of lease. And history evidence is replete with all this across the region, where member states get into agreements and lease land in the absence or without the knowledge of the local inhabitants. And so these are things that then needs to be, you need to find out before you engage in an advocacy, so that you have a targeted information. Two, there is also the understanding of the local context, because what you are also finding out is that local communities are enticed with certain monies because of their level of poverty. And therefore they will see you as, you are the one standing between them and riches, not knowing what happens tomorrow. So for me, these are some of the things that we needed to be looking at, especially when we are undertaking advocacy around land and large-scale investment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ken. Thank you for that beautiful, and by the way, you raised really very important questions, which I think some of them are sent to you. Let me apologize for calling, I had your name here as Peter Otieno. The K was in the middle. So when you came in as Ken, I was, please accept my apologies on that. If I had seen Peter, I would have automatically gone on to know that you were the one. And I know you work for Reconcile, executive director for Reconcile, but also do some work with Land Matrix that helps collect some of this data so that we understand. And I think you did make a lot of points on that. Understanding data is critical to our work. What I'm going to do is, maybe as a final, I have questions for you, and I'm sure that maybe Sister Ignatia is on. And before she gets disconnected, hopefully she doesn't, if she wants to maybe raise one or two things. Sister, welcome. And the question I had for you, you lead the Women's Empowerment project in Ghana as a coordinator. What can you add to this from a women's perspective and the work that you do there and what you've learned since you've been with AFJN as part of our food soldier, all of us going to those communities and learning from them, as Ken says. Can you hear me, Sister Ignatia? We having some little bit of connection problem here. Can you hear our Sister Ignatia?
Sister Ignatia, are you hearing us?
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Okay.
Are you hearing me?
Okay,
yes.
Yes, we can.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you, sister.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you.
Okay, I don't think you can hear us.
Hello?
But we can hear you. Yes,
Are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I don't want.
Yeah, connection is really poor, sister. We've lost her. what I wanted to do while we're waiting for Sister, maybe as a way of closing your argument, and Ken, maybe one thing you can go back to is really helping us understand some of these things. What is the role of local leaders there? And this is something AFJN has been doing, working with them, understanding that context. Some of the issues raised about we being the middle, difference between getting rich and having their land, and all of that has been like our experience on the ground. So maybe you could part of help us trying to understand that, even if Father ANIEDI wants to come in as somebody who has been in this field and who has had all of those experience. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just ask each one of you, the three panelists, maybe briefly as a way of summarizing, what would you want our audience to get away from this conversation, or actions, any action plan? Any action plan? Sorry about that. I think I was muted. I wasn't. All right. So who wants to go? Do we want Father ANIEDI to go? Or?
Okay. Yes, thank you. I think I like the word you use, action plan, because that's the crux of the matter. We cannot be silent in what is going on. Here it is. I want to revert to the issue of population. Africa's population is growing, and the land isn't growing with it. So giving away that land is setting up conflicts for the future. Look at Israel and Palestine and West Bank, and look at the many wars that have been fought over a little strip of land. That's number one. Number two is assigning contracts for 50, 99 years. By the time the next generation comes, those contracts are sealed, and it is difficult to uproot somebody who has been there 50, 60, 70 years. So the right of eminent domain rests with those who have the upper hand. And thirdly, I want to appeal to African leaders not to be not to settle with immediate gains. Immediate gains, oh, they're promising me this, let us give out and enter into contract. Let them develop an art of suspicion. By that I mean, do not trust everything a business partner comes to say, I'm going to do for you. The lessons of history is clear. It's been 200 years, and we see that time and time again. So they need to learn from the lessons of history that nobody goes into business to do charity. They are there to make profit, and profit is for them, not for you. So that would be my pleading for community leaders, for lawmakers, for the average person who wants the good of the next generation.
Thank you so much, Father ANIEDI. Do we want to go, Mr. BAMENJO? Would you like to go next, or whoever, or you can?
Yes, Rogers. I can go after Father. In terms of my own closing remarks, I think Father mentioned something that I find very important in terms of collaboration between like-minded organizations, fighting against this land grabbing. Because I continue to believe that, protecting the land rights of communities is very, very important. But for some of us who are on the field and working against the power structures that are so powerful, and with the dwindling civic space in most of the countries, having this linkage between national and international organizations is always a very good protection for the local, organizations. I think we're able to do what we did with the African Justice and Justice Network because of this collaboration, even in terms of providing us with some vital information that we use not just to confront the power structures, but to also convince them, about the rationale, why we're against what is being happening. Because the discourse is always to say we are bringing jobs, we are bringing infrastructure, which is always like the seduction stage. And everybody falls for it without looking at the cost-benefit analysis in terms of what these communities are missing. So collaboration between the national organizations and the linkage with international organizations or organizations based out of Africa is always very, very important.
Yeah. Collaboration. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. BAMENJO. Collaboration. And I will go on to Ken. If Ken would like to, maybe, and if you want to slightly expand on things that you raised as well, since you came in very late, and this will be a kind of closing statement, also what actions would really be necessary. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Stephen. I think I will pick it from where Jeff left. I think he mentions a critical term, collaboration. And collaboration with what, between what, and for what. I think one of the things, and still I circle back to the question that you raised initially at the beginning, that what is the value add for international organizations and the challenges I raised in terms of what happens with international organizations. International global organizations have leverage, and the leverage they have is global visibility and global connections. That's an ingredient in terms of visibility, but also in terms of creating a problem at the community level, at the rural level, become a global debate and forms a global conversation, which for me is important. And therefore, when we speak about collaboration partnership, then that needs to blend with a local understanding of the context. And therefore, I see that nexus is critical between international and local organizations, so that we don't talk about, the something that is coming that is top down, but we look at it something that is both vertical or horizontal in nature. And then I want to raise some 3 or 4 issues that I think in terms of action plan, or in terms of action plan, as you put it, would be important. One of them is when we are thinking about advocacy and we are talking about investment, there are certain issues that we need to put in, that we must have in mind, and those are rights of access, rights of use, and rights of ownership to certain land. And as I think is the Reverend who said that, land helps us to define ourselves from a heritage perspective, but also in terms of what defines us. And that is very true, because when you look at it and people say that, our great grandfathers were buried here, therefore it doesn't matter whether this road is going to bring development or not, we can't move. So people have such attachments. And therefore, we need then to look at our advocacy. And I'm speaking, from the point of view that this is also where reconcile cuts is, that customary tenure rights is something that is very, very important. And it should be at the core of undertaking advocacy when you are talking about large-scale land investments, and when you are talking about traditional institutions and the capacity and authority. But 2, there is the changing trend, which then now defines the appetite for large-scale land investment, and that is land use. Land use patterns and the different types of uses now also define, the kind of investment. And that's why I say that before you even start an advocacy on a particular investment, understand what that investment is, know who the investors are, because even local investors are investors, and they undermine the tenure rights of the people who depend on that land. And therefore, for me, that is really important, because that also now will help us, unlock the conversation about the returns in terms of the investor and the community's buy-in in terms of what we are doing. And that brings me to the 3rd thing, which is, how do we deal with communities, governments, and ourselves who are, the advocates? We need to look at how we constitute, if at all we do, what is a multi-stakeholder platform for roundtable conversations, so that we don't become enemies, what the government will see as enemies of development, but we also don't become the people who communities see as the people who are, noisemakers. Actually, NGOs are defined as nothing going on, so that we continue the conversation without solutions. So I think it is really important that we look at that, and therefore we try as much as possible to ensure that the conversation that we are having and the advocacy that we are, we are forging ahead with, meets certain conditions which certain boxes must be ticked. That there is community buy-in, and there is the relevance in terms of alignment with the policies. And I want to bring in, one thing that, just as I close, that I am implementing a project across 7 countries, IGAD countries, that is Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Somalia, South Sudan. And what is emerging is that the first thing that we just finished is to undertake, a policy analysis and looking at policies that define or that are relevant to pastoral. And out of the 7 countries, only 2 countries have explicitly recognized the rights of pastoralists to land, and that is Kenya and Ethiopia. But even though they have done that, it is still not practiced on the ground. So what do we do? So for me, those are some of the things that we probably needed to look at, and I think I will stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ken. Thank you for that beautiful closure, and all 3 great panelists. Unfortunately, we couldn't get Sister, and she tried to come a couple of times, and it's not for lack of trying, but that's just how technology is. So I wanted to end. I seem to get a lot of the same thing in this room, like this hunger for collaboration, understanding customary laws in this place. How do you understand land use, right? How do you deal with these communities? Policy analysis needs to be, data needs to be part of our work. And these are so critical because these are the things you need to be effective. Like, how do you prove to an audience that is so far removed that this is actually a problem to start with if you don't have the data? But also there are a lot of complexities that deal with this kind of work. In urban planning, we always say, especially for we the Africans who study urban planning in this part of the world, we say, unlike when you live in the West, where land use follows planning, in Africa, planning follows land use. You use the land and you start planning for it while people are living on it. So it's a whole different way of looking at that work. And this is exactly some of the things I seem to be hearing here. How do we understand that complex nature, wherein sometimes the laws are so that we need to get to the bottom of it to be able to be effective, but also to get the people who are involved. I wanted to just close this and just to say, when we started this work back, and ANIEDI would be my witness here, it was really a collaborative effort where they brought in over hundreds of organizations in Kenya, in Limuru, if I understand, to look at what are the issues that we could work on as a collective. And land grabbing was considered one of them, based on all of the numbers people had, all of the concerns that they came up with. So to some extent, there was some kind of statistical relevance to the work. We are back here is to look at 10 years after the fact, what have we found? What are we doing right? And this is really my own big question. What can we do differently, But let me say, this work is not a political issue. And sometimes it tends to come out like that. So when you say land grabbing, people are thinking, oh, it's multinational, oh, it's corporations. This is about people. It's about justice. It's about the future of Africa. When the land is lost, the food is lost, livelihood is lost, dignity is lost. So the question is, what role will all of us play? And I'm not just talking about the panelists, I'm also talking about the people who are here. A lot of them have supported this effort since we started. Praying, financial support, joining along with us as we have moved to some of these places. What do we play to make sure that, especially in this environment where with international development taking a different trajectory and the idea of self-reliance, and this becomes even more critical because there's nothing that Africa wants that is not in Africa. That is my philosophy. The idea is, how can we use those resources effectively to make sure that the people benefit from it, and then we don't have to be at the whims and caprices of some other person who is outside the continent making that decision for us. So I'm inviting you as a way of closing to stay informed of the work we are doing and all of us collaborating to support organizations that are working directly with these communities. And I really appreciate the work some of you are doing with these communities, and to advocate for policies that protect people's land. Before we end up, I want to thank our sponsors. Some of them might be on the line: the Raskop Foundation for Catholic Church, Catholic Activities, the Missionaries of Africa, Paul Handmaids of Jesus Christ, Holy Cross Sisters, SNDs, Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace, the Dominicans, all of our Catholic Church, who strongly believe that at the core of this work is the dignity of the human being. This is a core fundamental social justice, Catholic social teaching. And I want to thank you all for this. And our panelists, thank you for coming. We're looking forward for collaboration, and we will share more information so that we can continue from here. With that, I want to thank you. I know it's now 12:43. We didn't plan to go this long, but the conversation was so beautiful that we had to go. Thanks for teaching us, and thanks for the learning process. You have a blessed day wherever you are, and you take care. God bless.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And thanks to our producer.
Thank you.